Okay, I'm back. The wife decided to vacuum at that moment, and yeah, I didn't want to be interrupted with the background noise. Okay, experience should be awarded on things like combat, role-playing, creativity, use of skills and abilities, and training. I think that's a very important part of the whole experience and leveling up process. You need to be trained or taught, tutored, or mentored, you know, apprenticeship or just shadowing a master at whatever you want to get better at. You know, that's how it works in the real world. That's how it should work in, you know, the game world too. And, you know, as I remember playing, you know, D&D years ago, I think that's how it worked. You know, if you came out of the dungeon with 3,000 gold pieces, you could spend that gold piece amount, or maybe half that or something, on training in order to, and then that would translate into experience points. I don't know if it was a 1-to-1 basis or 1-to-2 or something, and that made total sense. You know, if you're a fighter and you want to get better at swinging your sword and, you know, cleaving people and, you know, maybe learn a new weapon or use some sort of trick shot with your bow, or casting, you know, weird advanced spells, you basically, you know, get the training for it. You attach yourself to, you know, a master of that, master fighter or wizard or something like that, and you get the training for it. You know, either you pay for it or you can barter for it. You can do something for this, you know, master wizard or master fighter or thief or rogue, and you know, tit for tat. And that's plenty of role-playing opportunities too, because, you know, let's say your next adventure, you know, you got to do some work for the Thieves Guild or something like that, because they're training, you know, an essential member of your party. So you got to have the training, and they need this assignment done, and so, you know, there you go. Oh yeah, and this is, someone brought this up in a comment of my last video, like miniatures and like the grid, you know, the giant grid where you can put your miniatures. Okay, so there's that versus imagining it all in your head. And it didn't even occur to me until just a little while ago that, you know, not only can a battle scene or an encounter or something like that be just as good without miniatures and terrain or, you know, a grid map where you can move your guy like 3 spaces, but maybe visualizing it and not using that stuff is superior, maybe vastly superior. Because I can still recall battles that I've had characters in decades ago that we didn't have anything, you know, maybe we had little tiny miniatures just for marching order or something like that. But, you know, it was all in my head. It was all imagining it. It was all visualization. I can still remember stuff like that more clearly than some Dungeons and Dragons, like 4th edition and even Pathfinder stuff from a couple of years ago that, you know, where you had a bunch of miniatures and you had some terrain or some squares, you know, measuring things off, like, oh, I can move 20 or 5-foot step, or, you know, I got reach for this weapon, so I'm exactly 2 hexes or 2 spaces away, whatever. So that right there, you know, if I can see it in my mind's eye 20 years ago better than I can see it 2 years ago using the miniatures and terrain and whatnot, then it just clearly shows that visualizing it is better. Because when I think back to just a couple years ago, all I can remember is the specific miniatures that were used and the terrain that was used. You know, because my focus was down here on the board, right in front of us, and it wasn't in my imagination. You know, it was like a crutch So my imagination basically wasn't even used, it wasn't even activated, because I was just seeing what was in front of me. And so for this next campaign, I definitely want to get away from all that. So I'm not going to use any miniatures. Not only will I hopefully visualize it more and better, but it'll save me time and money, and I won't have to come up with some crazy, elaborate piece of terrain, or, paint a whole bunch of new miniatures that's going to be expensive and whatnot. So that's a good point right there. I talked about this in the last episode, flavor options. A lot of people said that the second edition, or AD&D, I guess, there's the whole paladins and princesses kind of flavor, or subgenre of fantasy. And I never really got into that, because I was more into the darker stuff, like Conan, and more gritty fantasy, more misanthropic, sometimes evil adventurers, or at least anti-heroes, things with demons and drow, and I don't know, just like knights in shining armor, saving damsels in distress, things like that. I mean, that's okay, I guess, but that really was never my cup of tea, I think 5th edition should really specify that there are these different genres, subgenres of play, or different flavors of D&D. And each individual and each gaming group is going to have their own. And maybe you can mix them together, or one can, bleed into another. Or maybe you can have a nice mix of, a few different ones. But you're never going to satisfy everyone with just one type. And I think if the people making D&D Next stick to just one type, that's going to do disservice to that whole edition, because it's going to disenfranchise some people that like a whole different flavor of D&D than that. And that kind of also goes into the whole old school thing, the original basic Dungeons & Dragons and advanced Dungeons & Dragons, had a different flavor from 3rd edition, and then had a different flavor from 4th edition. I'm sure 5th edition is going to be completely different too. There's different settings, which helps a lot. There's Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, which was a favorite of mine when that came out, Planescape, and Spelljammer, and I don't know, whatever else. So, Eberron, things like that. I didn't care for that too much, but that's just me. I don't know. I think the makers of D&D should keep that in mind. So the game I'm going to be running is going to be a good mix between basic D&D, AD&D, a little bit of 3rd and 4th edition, like I said, and hopefully bring in some 5th edition too, like the advantage and disadvantage. Really, the only thing I would definitely change about the Dungeons & Dragons from the 70s and 80s are the vast improvements that have been made with like 2-hit and armor class. Like the whole Thaco thing and armor class, the lower it gets, the better it is. I mean, that sucked in comparison with now. If you have a +4 strength bonus and you're wielding a great sword, then, add your +4 to your hit bonus and try to hit, a target that with an 18 armor class. That just makes so much more sense, and it's just so much easier. And to go along with that, the ability modifiers to skill checks and abilities, saves, things like that. That's a great improvement. If you just took small things like that and you added just those things, maybe 1 or 2 other little tweaks to AD&D, then you'd almost have the perfect game right there. Barring a few house rules or homebrew, things that you come up with yourself. So, definitely going to keep those advancements, because that improves the game in my mind. and that makes it that much more playable. So I guess this is the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts. This is really long, a lot longer than I intended, but hopefully I touched upon some cool stuff, and I'll let you know how my new campaign and gaming group goes. Alright, Ya Cthulhu Photography.